I never thought I'd cross a line like this, not with him. He pulled away from me slowly like part of him. Didn't want to leave. I didn't move, couldn't. I just lay there, arms tight against my sides, breathing through my nose, trying not to make a sound. My robe was open, the belt still twisted beneath one leg. I got married, young, raised 2 kids, kept a clean house, followed the rules. Love became routine, familiar, steady. I never chased desire. I maintained, I smiled. When I was supposed to, I listened more than I spoke. Convinced myself that stability was the same as happiness. But I was wrong. It all started on a thick, heavy Friday in June. I had just finished watering the garden when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel, my closest friend. Since college, her message was short. Would it be okay if Ethan stayed with you this weekend? My dad's in the hospital. I need to drive to Tallahassee. I paused for a moment. Her son, Ethan, 17, nearly 18, I remembered when he used to hide behind her legs during visits. Now, he was taller than both of us, deep-voiced and calm, with that quiet confidence that makes you look twice. Of course, I said yes. He arrived that evening, duffel bags slung over his shoulder. Thanks for letting me stay, Miss Garrett, please, I said, with a smile. You're not 12 anymore, call me Diane, he grinned. And I saw it, then the way his eyes held mine, just a little too long. I told myself not to notice. I told myself he was just a kid. He was. That night, something shifted. Later that evening, he arrived, duffel bags hanging off his shoulder. Thanks for letting me stay, Miss Garrett, please. I smiled. You're not 12 anymore, call me Diane. He gave me a grin. And for a moment, his eyes stayed on mine a little longer than they should have. I told myself not to notice. That night I made spaghetti, apparently still his favorite. He ate like he hadn't all day. We watched a movie. After dinner, something loud and full of explosions. He was locked into it, eyes fixed like he was trying to solve something buried in each scene. I barely paid attention to the movie. I just watched him. Later, I brought him extra towels, found him sitting alone on the back deck. Eyes on the night, the grass was lit with fireflies, and cicadas filled the thick heat with their constant hum. You okay? I asked gently. He nodded, slow. Sometimes I wish I could just stop time. You ever feel that way? I looked at him, studied the sharp edge of his jaw, how the moonlight traced his face. Yeah, I said, more than you'd think. He looked at me then, and something passed between us. Not heat, not tension, just quiet understanding, like something clicked into place. Then he smiled, stood up, and said good night. I stayed out there a while longer, feeling something warm open up in my chest. It wasn't attraction. I told myself that again and again. It was just the feeling of being seen, really seen. The next day moved easy, slow. I made pancakes. He helped me clean out the garage. Didn't even have to ask. We played music, Fleetwood Mac mostly. When he started singing along, I laughed. My mom raised me on your playlists, he said, with a grin. By late afternoon, we were both sweaty, dusty, and tired. I suggested we stop for the day, and he nodded, wiping his forehead with the bottom of his shirt. I looked away quickly, not because I had to, but because I wanted to be careful with the way I was starting to feel. We cooled off in the pool. I hadn't worn that old one piece in years. It felt tighter than I remembered, clung in places it never used to. When I stepped outside, he was already in the water, floating on his back, eyes closed the surface, barely rippling "come on," and he said, without even looking, the water was warm, not quite refreshing, but better than the thick summer air. We splashed a little, talked about nothing, just light, easy words drifting between us. Then he looked at me, really looked. "You don't smile much," he said. "Blink." "I do," I said, trying to brush it off. "Not really. When it's real, it lights up your whole face." I tried to laugh, but his words settled deep, somewhere under my ribs. He wasn't seeing me as someone's mom or his mom's friend. He was just seeing me as me. That night I couldn't sleep. His voice kept replaying in my head, the way he laughed, the way he looked at me and didn't look away. Something stirred inside me, something that hadn't moved in a long, long time. Something I thought was gone. The next morning, I was up before the sun. The house was still quiet. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the soft gray light stretch across the yard. I told myself feeling would fade, that it was just a moment, nothing more than. I heard the sound of footsteps, bare feet on hardwood, and my heart did something I hadn't felt in years. It fluttered. He came into the room, eyes heavy, with sleep, hair messy like he just rolled out of bed morning. He said, his voice soft, "You're up early." I replied, "Want some eggs?" He nodded and sat nearby. While I cooked, we moved through the morning, slowly, quietly. He didn't say much, but he watched me in that way again, the way that, nervous and curious, both at once. That's how I felt, standing there watching him, while pretending to focus on the eggs. When I handed him his plate, our fingers touched just for a second, but it was enough to send a quiet jolt through me, like something long asleep had suddenly opened its eyes. "You always seem so calm," he said between bites. "Is that your way of saying I'm boring?" I teased. "No," he said with a small smile. "You make this house feel safe." I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever told me that before. I'd spent years being the person who held everything together, the one who stayed steady while life moved around me. I made things look easy on the outside, even when they were. But hearing that from him, that he felt safe here with me, it meant something more than it should have. It meant he saw me, not just what I did, but who I was. After breakfast, we drifted into the day. He curled up on the porch with a book, his long legs stretched out, and bare feet tapping to music only he could hear. I slipped back into routine: laundry, dishes, wiping down counters, folding sheets. But my thoughts weren't in the chores. They kept circling back to the way he looked at me, the sound of his voice, the way his presence filled up every quiet corner of the house. Outside, storm clouds began to roll in, thick and slow. The air changed, heavy and expectant, like it knew something was coming, something that couldn't be undone. By afternoon, the storm had settled in heavy clouds pressing low, and the rain came steady against the windows. We stayed inside together, both of us on sit ends of the couch, the soft rhythm of water outside filling the silence. I lit a few candles, their glow casting shadows that danced quietly across the room. We pulled out an old photo album, pages full of years gone by. "That's my daughter," I said, pointing to a picture of a muddy little girl holding a frog. "She's stronger than I ever was." He looked at the photo, then at me. "You don't give yourself enough credit." I felt the weight of his gaze and became aware of how close he really was. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the quiet warmth building between us. "You remind me of someone I used to know," I whispered. "Is that a good thing?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. but also a little scary. We sat like that, for a moment, neither of us moving, the air thick with something unspoken. Then he reached over his hand, brushing against mine. A soft, steady touch, fingers warm. "And sure, you don't have to be afraid with me," he said. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't pull away, not at first. Something in that moment held me still. But then slowly I stood. "I'm going to make tea," I said gently. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter, my fingers pressing hard into the edges, my heart beating wild and fast, like it didn't know what to do with itself, like it had just remembered how to feel again. My heart thudded hard, and uneven. I told myself it was nothing, just a passing moment, a flicker of confusion in the middle of a quiet, lonely weekend. But even as I stood in the kitchen, I could still feel the trace of his fingers on mine, like they'd left a mark that didn't show. That night I lay in bed listening to the storm taper off into stillness. Sleep didn't come easy. The air felt different. And so did everything between us. The line we hadn't spoken about, the one that used to be clear, had blurred. And I didn't know what to do with that, only that I couldn't go back to pretending it hadn't happened. The next morning, the air had cooled the sky. A soft gray eye stood out on the porch, coffee warming my hands, watching mist curl across the lawn. The quiet felt heavier. Somehow Ethan hadn't come downstairs yet, and I didn't know if I wanted him to or not. Eventually, I heard the familiar sound of his bare feet on the floorboards. "Morning," he said, his voice gentle. "Hey," I replied. We stood there for a while, not saying anything, just breathing the same still air. "You okay?" he asked after a moment. "I'm not sure," I said honestly. He nodded slow, like he understood more than I'd spoken yesterday. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. You didn't," I said quickly, then softer. "Not exactly." He waited, didn't push, just stood there beside me. "I think I forgot what it feels like to be noticed, really noticed. And I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't looking for it. But now that it's here, I don't know how to unfeel it. I wasn't expecting it from you," I said softly. "And I wasn't expecting to feel it either," he replied, his voice steady but quiet, like he didn't want to break the moment. The rest of the day moved slow. We went grocery shopping, folded laundry, watched another movie. Nothing big, nothing dramatic, just the small rhythms of a shared space, moments filled with quiet and glances. And something warm just under the surface. Halfway through the movie, he reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. Our fingers laced together, naturally, like it had been waiting to happen. We sat like that, not talking, not moving, just being still, in the same room, breathing the same air. "You're the first person in a long time who really listened to me," he said, "who didn't treat me like some dumb kid. You're not," I whispered. And I see that my hand moved before I could think, brushing the hair from his forehead, gentle, soft, familiar. He leaned in close, not touching yet, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath, and something in me stirred deep and strong. I stood. "Too fast. I need to start dinner," I said. He didn't stop me, just let me go, with that same steady look in his eyes. Later that night, after we'd eaten and cleaned up the kitchen, he turned to me. "Thank you," he said, "for what I asked, for being you." I didn't know what to say, so I just reached out, touched his cheek lightly, my fingers resting there for a second longer than they should have. Then I let go. Gently, I let my hand fall away. And in that small, tender moment, something settled inside me. This wasn't about age or rules, or the lines we're taught never to cross. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't planned. It was about being seen, truly seen, about being wanted not for what I did or who I was to others, but simply for existing. After he went upstairs, I stayed behind the house, quiet around me, shadows stretching long across the floor. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't try to sleep. I just sat there, letting the weight of everything settle over me. He was leaving in the morning. Things would go back to how they were, or at least they'd look like it from the outside. Same walls, same routines, same quiet dinners and folded laundry. But inside, something had shifted. Something had cracked open, because now I was awake, and I couldn't unfeel what had been stirred inside me. I couldn't go back to pretending I didn't want more.